Heading missing juvenile, 1008 Stanford Court, 1008 Stanford Court, Hendersonville. Caller advised this morning they woke up and their 15-year-old male was not in the bed. We had a white male, 3 blonde hair, approximately 5 foot, 120 pounds. I was going to be wearing a black sweatshirt and black sweatpants. Juvenile does have a form of autism. This is the first time it happened. I was going to be in the home before midnight. All the doors are locked at this time.
10-4.
By the time this video is released, it will have been nearly 5 months since Sebastian Rogers went missing, and he has still not been found. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome back to The Lore Watch. Covering this story at this time is not something that I had initially planned on doing, and that was for a number of reasons. One of those reasons was that we had planned to cover the moon landing and the conspiracies surrounding it this week because it's going to be the 55th anniversary of that event. The other one is that I typically try to avoid covering ongoing missing persons cases, ones where the police response is still active, the investigation is still ongoing, because oftentimes all of the information is not out there, and you don't want to accidentally interfere. You don't want to cause a whole hullabaloo about one aspect of the case that sidetracks the law enforcement group's attention, and then you have diverted resources away from what could have been a better lead. And when I first came across this story, it was around the same time that Riley Strain had disappeared. In fact, it was while I was researching for our Riley Strain video. And at the time, it looked very weird. It had been about 2 weeks between this disappearance and the disappearance of Riley Strain. At some points, I wondered, could these two things be connected? But it was such a sensitive topic that I felt it best to let that one be. And you know what? We'll focus on the Riley Strain thing, and if anything more comes out about this Sebastian Rogers story, then I'm going to look into that. But there just wasn't enough information out around, March, I think it was the week of March 22nd that we wrote that video. So I said, let's let it be. And if anything more comes to my attention, I'll look into that. And in the months that followed, the name Sebastian Rogers kind of just fell out of the news cycle. And I'll admit, it slipped my mind to go back and look at it again. And then around 4th of July weekend, I got a direct message on Instagram, and it was from Brayson Cyrus, Miley Cyrus's younger brother, the member of that Cyrus family. But going beyond the fact that when somebody from one of Nashville's biggest music families asks you to look into a local case, it's just the kind of thing that you do. You just go and do that. It was really the way that Brayson talked to me about it, how sincere he was, and how much he really seemed to care about finding out what happened to this kid, that I said, all right, this is more important than the moon landing. We're putting that to the wayside. I'm going to see what I can find out about Sebastian Rogers, because at the very least, maybe we can get this back into the news cycle. To be perfectly honest with you, I had no idea how convoluted this story had become in the months after it had fallen off of my radar. It is bananas, is really the only way to put it. There are so many conflicting accounts, so many gaping holes in narratives that I actually had to sit there and tell myself, I was like, this needs to be 2 videos. I cannot cover this entire story. I cannot do Sebastian the justice that needs to be done in 1 week of research. It just won't happen. So in a similar vein to the way that we did our Dyatlov Pass videos about a year ago, this part 1 is going to cover kind of the timeline of events leading up to when everything gets weird. So this video is going to introduce the important characters, it's going to tell you what happened in what sequence, and kind of give you the groundwork for why the next video, which comes out a week from today, is going to be so convoluted. I think that you'll understand when we get to the end here why this needed more time. But worry not, this is not going to be some sort of especially short or summary video, and that's partially because this gave me a great chance to go and take a look back at any updates to the Riley Strain case. So the first half of this video is going to be covering the timeline of the Sebastian Rogers disappearance, some of the police calls, how that search developed over the course of the first month or so. And then we're going to go and look at the autopsy and toxicology report from Riley Strain and some of the questions I still have about that case for the second half of this video. Really probably like the last third. But before we get into all of that, there is one thing I need to do, and that is tell you about our partner for today's video, Delete Me. Delete Me is a service that is designed to keep you from being not anonymous when you didn't choose to be. What I mean by that is that there are data brokers out there who come in and grab your data. Have you filled out a form on a website recently, given it your email, your name, your birthday? Good news, it is now owned by some data broker somewhere. I'm not kidding, I am not giving you scare tactics. I used to work in digital marketing and I used these lists myself. I will be honest with you, I didn't want to. I did not like my jobs in marketing, but we all gotta pay the bills somehow. Now, what Delete Me does is basically undo the things that gave me your information back when I had that job. And they do that by going to all of the listing sites and removing your information from them. Now, a lot of the times you can request that, but they'll send you an email for confirmation and then double confirmation, and you can't really get out of it. They'll just find a way to wiggle it in, or you'll request it be taken down and it'll pop up a month later. With Delete Me, that's not the case. You give them your information, and then they use that to go and find where it's listed. And then a real person files a real takedown request and really follows up on it. And the reason that's important is that your email address, your full name, your home address, your phone number, and possibly even your social security number are being out there shared and sold around in different data broker circles. And due to the sheer volume of lists and brokers, it's almost impossible to get this all done yourself. So what Delete Me does is handles all of that stress for you. This will help to protect your identity from being stolen. It will help to protect you from stalkers, from harassment, all sorts of different things that can come from your business being out there on the net. For me, one of the reasons I love Delete Me is that it makes it a lot harder for all the nutjob flat earthers out there who are pissed off at me for the last few months to fige out where I live. And that's kind of necessary. There have been threats. If you'd like to try Delete Me yourself, then you can go to joindeleteme.com/lorelodge and use code lorelodge at checkout to get 20% off all US consumer plans. Once again, that is joindeleteme.com/lorelodge and use code lorelodge at checkout to get 20% off all US consumer plans. That said, if you plan on committing a crime or something of the sort, please don't use Delete Me because it makes it easier for me to find you. Early in the morning of Monday, February 26, 2024, police in Hendersonville, Tennessee, a small city just northeast of Nashville, received a call about a missing child. That boy was, and as far as anyone is aware, still is Sebastian Rogers, who lived in the Stafford Court neighborhood with his parents, Katie and Christopher Proudfoot, and he lived about half a mile west of Beach High School, where he appears to have been either a freshman or sophomore. Katie is his biological mother, and Christopher is his stepfather. But that morning, rather than driving her son to school, Katie Proudfoot was calling the police and then driving around the area in her baby blue Infiniti SUV, looking for Sebastian. And when police arrived on scene, they were met with a somewhat difficult set of circumstances. Nobody knew precisely when Sebastian had left the home, nor if he'd done so of his own volition or at the urging of somebody else. All they had to go on is that he was last known to have been in the home before midnight. And that, in and of itself, is not a particularly specific hint. In addition to that, he'd left his phone in the kitchen, his shoes were still by the front door, and there was no indication as to what direction he'd left in. That meant this was going to be an uphill battle to find him, but with no reason yet to suspect foul play, police were hopeful that he would not have strayed far from the home and would be found somewhere within the general area. And at first, it seemed like that might be the case. While there were no footprints to follow, a police dog named Max led its handler east from the Proudfoot's neighborhood and into the construction site between Stafford Court and Beach High School. At first, it was only a scent trail, but then, as they progressed further into the construction site, the officer handling Max started to see footprints. The canine unit then followed these footprints further into the construction site and right up to the edge of a retaining pond. And then, Max went into the pond.
Max led me straight to the retaining pond. Over behind Willow Boulevard, he dove right into the water.
But wherever the boy could have gone from there, It's hard to say. The police communications don't record any other further footprints. Or at least I should say the police communications I was able to get my hands on, which came from the YouTube channel Missing in Plain Sight. I don't know particularly where they got them, but it was the most complete version of the audio that I was able to find during this week's research. I'm going to be trying to see if I can find a more complete version from the cops in this upcoming week. In any case, after checking the retaining pond, the construction crews that worked at the site were beginning to arrive on scene. So the police told them, hey, keep your eyes out, there's a missing boy in the area, check the spots you're working, and if you see anything, let us know. Also, just in case I wasn't clear enough, everything that I'm talking about right now comes from that police radio communications, and all of that came from, again, Missing in Plain Sight's videos that have the audio in them. And it's that audio, those communications, that told me that for the next several hours, police checked every tip they could. Anything that came in, they were willing to give it a look. And this meant checking everything from downtown Hendersonville all the way out towards Gallatin, 12 miles to the east. But no matter where they checked, no matter how many tips came in, nothing turned out to be Sebastian Rogers. And then one of the police officers operating a drone spotted something. Drone operator said, "Hi guys, the construction zone, there's another pond. There's somebody standing in the woods. It looks like a person, it is a person, we know, but there's another pond. He's standing back there by himself, past the construction zone in the same area back there." Then another officer says, "Next to the north of us?" The drone operator then says, "Yeah, the north end of it, yeah. Where they're working on the machinery at, go straight back. There's another pond back there, but there's a person in the woods by that pond, past the house on the other side of the tree line." Another officer responds and says, "Going back toward beach or going the back side?" And drone operator says, "Yeah, on the back side, and he's not moving. He's just standing there by himself in the woods." With this being reported, several officers utilizing ATVs to travel and then the drone for coordination made their way back toward this pond, towards this man that's standing stock still. They got within 25 feet, and then within 15, and then they recognized precisely what it is they were looking at.
It's a mannequin. Sorry, guys. Look just like a person from the air.
And unfortunately, that is just kind of how the rest of that day went. While the officers should absolutely be commended for the attention they paid to this case, for the efforts they made during that initial search process, ultimately, their efforts turned up nothing. They checked every house, explored every unlocked crawl space, and reviewed the security footage from every home that would give it to them, but there was no sign of Sebastian. And I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been during this initial search phase for the officers going to all of these different homes that had cameras and just finding nothing on them. Some of the time, it was like 139 Willow Bend, where you had cameras looking right back out at that retaining pond that Max led his handler to, but those guys wouldn't answer the door. And then you had houses like 1015 Kellen Lane, one road over from Stafford Court, where people had Ring cameras that just didn't pick anything up. And when people did answer the door, some said that they had seen Sebastian in the past, but they hadn't seen him that morning. One neighbor was able to tell police that he had once found Sebastian hiding under his son's car, which added check under cars to the police search criteria, but nothing much other than that. Meanwhile, other tips came in, with boys matching Sebastian's description reported in Gallatin, downtown Hendersonville, and along Long Hollow Road, and these are all three very different locations. Unfortunately, none of these leads turned out to be anything more than a sighting of a white teenage male who was vaguely similar in appearance to the missing child. One possibility that the police considered was that Sebastian was actually not in the area anymore at all, and that he had deliberately tried to go somewhere else. And one suggestion was the town of White House, Tennessee, which is about 7 miles north of where he lived if you were to go just as the crow flies. It's more like 10 miles if you take the roads. So definitely not, a casual little walk, but also not an impossible trek for a 15-year-old boy to make. Now, as for why he would want to go to White House, there was not a ton of information on that presented, at least not in the police recordings. I'm going to go and see if I can find more information about it, but a cursory search didn't turn up anything. All that we got from the police tapes was he had some ties at White House High School, and every time he got in trouble, he wanted to go back to White House. I notified White House PD, and they're notifying their SAR. Another officer suggested that they check Strike and Spare, which is a bowling and arcade facility in downtown Hendersonville, because allegedly, Katie Proudfoot had taken Sebastian there last night, well, the previous night, I should say, to do just the whole bowling and arcade thing. Officers thought it was possible that Sebastian had enjoyed being there so much that he decided to walk back and try and get back in after bed. But even checking down there was no sign of Sebastian. So, with nothing found in the immediate vicinity, the case was escalated. News Nation reporting that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued an endangered child alert at 11:17 a.m. on February 26th. The day after Sebastian's disappearance was reported, the endangered child alert was upgraded to an Amber Alert, which carried one specific difference. There was concern that this was an abduction, but the question then is why suspect this was a kidnapping? One very simple possibility is statistics. Sebastian's biological parents, Seth Rogers and Katie Proudfoot, were divorced, and according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, family members are responsible for about 58% of reported abductions. So, as a result, a non-custodial parent is going to be one of the first people that the police look at in child abduction cases. On the other hand, the NCMEC does consider autism to be a risk factor in child exploitation, and the concern here would be that someone either gained Sebastian's trust, lured him out, or just convinced him to leave the house, and then took him. No matter what the official reason for the change to an Amber Alert was, they were definitely concerned about an abduction. So, with the Amber Alert issued, police waited for tips to come in while professional and volunteer search groups combed the Hendersonville area looking for Sebastian. And as they did so, they were supported by a group called Sumner County Fire Buffs, who provided food to those searching. Speaking to Nashville-based WKRN News, Fire Buff spokeswoman, Nicole Federchek, said, "The sense in the community is everybody just wants to find Sebastian. This little boy that most of us have never even met before, and they just want to bring him home to his family." Meanwhile, Sumner County Deputy Chief Eric Craddock told people to closely monitor and check their surveillance systems. And he said, "I think that's going to be what breaks the case. That is to say, with how many surveillance systems there are out there now, between home CCTV, Ring doorbells, dash cams, somebody must have seen Sebastian." But then, on Wednesday, the 28th of February, WKRN reported something a little weird when the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation put out the following statement. "Understandably, there is interest in hearing from friends and family to help provide more of a personal context about Sebastian. However, we have been requested by the family, Katie and Chris Proudfoot, to let local media know that they are not in a position to speak or to be available to media at this time. We have told them that while we would relay their message, it would be the decision of the individual media outlets and reporters to proceed as they see fit." And it's important to note that to this point, 3 days into the search, the Proudfoots had not made any public appearances. No speaking to the media, no gatherings, no vigils, nothing. Everything had been relayed through the police. And while I understand wanting to avoid the media circus, it does strike me as a little odd that they would completely shut them out. You know, given the near total lack of information about Sebastian, I would expect that they would want to share anything that might help find him. And I'll also say that this was one of the first things that tipped me off that this was not going to be a straightforward investigation. And the same can be said about some things with his father, Seth. This is going to get really weird. So for now, I just want you guys to take in what I say. Don't make any assumptions. Don't jump to any conclusions. Obviously, do not harass anybody. Do not, go out there and start talking about how, it was definitely the Proudfoots, or, it was definitely Seth. The goal right now is to just get the information compiled, tell you what is factual information, and move on from there. All I'm saying right now is an acknowledgement that this struck me as a little weird. And the reason, and a big part of the reason it did, is because the police weren't really making much progress. If the police had been getting, lead after lead after lead, crawling and scraping their way towards finding Sebastian, I'd understand wanting to let them just continue doing what they're doing. But they were not having any success. And that's not a dig at the cops. The truth of the matter is, looking at the information they had available to them, I don't see a good way to track Sebastian down without considering foul play. As News Nation reported, the pond that Max the dog led his handler to, the one where there were no footprints leading away from it and Max couldn't pick up a scent trail leading away, they drained it. Nothing there. They also reviewed tons of security camera footage, and there was nothing there. And as they deployed other dog teams to try and search the areas, once again, nothing could be picked up. The good news is that this did not seem to dampen the spirits of the community. If anything, it invigorated them further. And by March 2nd, WKRN was reporting that local business owners had pooled enough money to post a reward for any information leading to Sebastian's safe return. And by the time that article was published, that fund was up to $3,000. While the community rallied, however, News Nation reported on the 4th that police were planning to scale the effort down. Speaking to the media, Deputy Chief Eric Craddock explained that they were transitioning from the ground search to the investigative side. Now, I think it's important to talk about what scaling down the ground search means here, as well as what transitioning to the investigative side means. A lot of the time when I see people comment on missing persons cases, it's a lot of, well, why did the police stop looking? Why'd they scale it down? What were they thinking? They should have tried harder. Fact of the matter is, police departments, while they do have plenty of issues and we talk about them frequently, one of the ones they really can't control is funding and how many officers they can have and how well those officers can be trained. Most missing persons searches are not handled by the investigating department alone. They are a combination of the investigating department, outside agencies, volunteer groups, and then also some private search and rescue. All of that costs time and money that can only really be devoted for so long. The ground search had covered a ton of territory all over the Hendersonville area, and the fact of the matter was, they'd found absolutely nothing useful. In this situation, the first week of that ground search included over 200 officials from a dozen different agencies. And then on top of those guys, you also had volunteer efforts. So this was not a small search, this was not a short search, this was intensive. And by the 4th, they were just at the point where nothing new was coming up. This was after using drones, helicopters, horses, search dogs, and dive teams. So my point in saying this is they looked for Sebastian. Scaling down the search and switching to the investigative side simply meant there's nothing more we feel we can find from the ground effort, and the resources are better spent looking into other tips that are coming in and reviewing the evidence we have. Unfortunately, this is also typically the part of the investigation, at least in my experience reviewing so many of these, where police have a tendency to forget about it. And I do want to say that it's usually not an issue of malice or them saying, we don't care, it doesn't matter. It's that at first you've got an entire team dedicated to it, and then you have something else happen. And then you've got half a team, and then you've got a couple of partners, and then you got one guy, and eventually that guy leaves and nobody's paying attention to the case anymore. I cannot tell you how many of the cases we've looked at where that's what happened. Just, it fell out of view. Even Tommy Booth, one that happened in our backyard a decade or 2 decades ago, we went and talked to the police about it. 20 years, guys. There was not a single person in that station who worked the case. And the reason I kind of harp on this in this case is that I don't want the Hendersonville Police Department to get flack for this stage of the search. If you've been watching the channel for a long time, I'm sure you know when the police need their heels put to the fire, we do it. I don't feel that we're looking at that kind of situation right now where the police department needs to be admonished. So anyway, I do also need to say that another important aspect of that announcement that the police were scaling down the search was that they also did instruct residents of the area to make sure that they were frequently checking their own properties twice a day, checking all of their surveillance footage, and even taking a look at their trail cams. While Sebastian and the Proudfoot family did live in a little suburban development community, a lot of the area around them is very rural, so you would expect there to be a lot of different hunters and people like that in the area who are going to be keeping an eye on the wildlife on their land, and if somebody was crossing it, they'd probably pass in front of a trail cam. There isn't a ton of reporting about what happened between the 4th and the 7th, but on the 7th, local reporter Nick Barris said that the Sumner County Sheriff's Office were searching a landfill in Kentucky where the Stafford Court neighborhood trash was taken. And this was not based off of any sort of specific tip. He just said that they referred to it as a precautionary measure to eliminate possible options and questions. And after a likely unpleasant search of the landfill, they determined that Sebastian was almost certainly not there. And then, as foreshadowed by the deputy chief's comments on the 3rd, Barris also reported that authorities appeared to be moving forward with a possible criminal investigation, though they had named no suspects. A few days later, on the 10th of March, the case gained a little bit of drama when Sebastian Rogers' father Seth went on Elizabeth Vargas Reports to express some of his confusion and frustration over how the case was going. He He told Vargas it doesn't make a lot of sense. His shoes were at the front door, his Nintendo Switch was there, his phone was in the kitchen. I still can't figure it out. I've been looking everywhere, handing out flyers. In addition to that, he was also perplexed by the fact that Sebastian's shoes were still in the home, because as he could recall it, Sebastian did not like being barefoot at all. As you might be aware, many people on the autism spectrum struggle with certain sensory issues. A lot of the time, certain things can be overstimulating, overwhelming, and textures are often one of those triggers. You might not like the way something feels in your mouth or on your hands, or in this case, on your bare feet. What seemed to upset Seth the most, however, was an apparent lack of communication from the Proudfoots, who he said had not spoken to him in over 2 weeks and also had yet to make any public appearances. The Proudfoots made no response to this, but a TBI press release quoted by WKRN insisted that they had remained cooperative since the search began. The statement also said that there are little clues to indicate what happened to Sebastian or where he may be, and that while foul play hadn't been ruled out, it also had yet to be proven. One very helpful aspect of this specific WKRN article is a Q&A section presented by the TBI, where they took some of the common questions they were getting from media, from individuals, and just gave a list of written statements on them. The first question offered was the most simple, which was, which areas have been searched? And the TBI responded, within the first several days of the search, more than 2,000 miles were searched on foot. Many of these areas were initially searched and searched again. Law enforcement officers would search the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhoods, schools, and many other areas of the county by foot. Bloodhounds and handlers have searched the same areas. There have been aerial searches with helicopter, drones, and a fixed-wing plane. These aerial searches have been conducted on multiple days and multiple nights using thermal imaging technology. Sebastian's residence, the yard, the house, and the vehicles have all been searched multiple times. The neighborhood where Sebastian lives has been canvassed. Neighbors' houses have been searched. Sebastian is autistic and his family says he is drawn to water. Pools in the neighborhood were searched. Dive teams were brought in and bodies of water around the neighborhood and beyond that area were searched, including caves. I don't think the TBI is going to be winning a Pulitzer for the beauty of their writing here, but they did answer the question in full. The next question related to surveillance and what steps were being taken to look into household, business, and cell phone videos. And the TBI answered, many neighbors and businesses have provided video from home and business surveillance systems. We are grateful for that cooperation. The video has been collected and from the beginning of the investigation has been analyzed and enhanced where possible by tech experts and with the TBI, FBI, and Secret Service. So keep that in mind. That's 2 different federal agencies that have now reviewed this footage. To date, nothing gathered from these video systems has been determined to be significant. We do caution that some surveillance video being shared in the public may have been misinterpreted or misidentified or not shown in its entirety. Now, I do want to take a break really quick. I'm not sure what they're referring to here. A video did come out. It was publicly addressed by Nick Barris on, I want to say it was the 14th, where he said that this appears to look out the back of a residence that backs up basically to the Stafford Court residence, and that it was seeing across a common area, but I can't tell what the common area was. Also, that report came out 4 days after this statement. So I'm not sure if that's what they were talking about, and the news report was just, out of line with what the police were saying, or if this was a different video. But the police go on, or the TBI, I should say, go on to say it has been determined that it does not hold any evidentiary significance to the investigation. I also do want to say I'm going to be looking into that Nick Barris video a little bit more and doing some more analysis of where it factors into the whole story and what it might possibly show in the part 2 of this video, which should come out next week. The TBI statement, however, goes on to say, numerous searches have been executed, cell phone data has been analyzed, and any other available digital evidence has been collected, searched, and documented. Information was collected from Sebastian's gaming system and has been analyzed, which I think, is them considering the possibility that he had been having online communication with somebody who then tried to lure him out of the home. Over the Nintendo Switch, I guess. They go on to say, with help from the FBI, vehicles that were placed in the area at or around the time Sebastian's disappearance have been accounted for. These videos and all the electronic evidence that has already been reviewed is also being re-investigated. And finally, they gave an answer to the questions of what's going on now and what is next. And they said, the search for Sebastian has not stopped. Every day, tips and leads are investigated. People are being interviewed and re-interviewed. Evidence that has been reviewed once already is being gone over again. We'll admit this does begin to sound a little bit like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We continue to ask residents in the area of the search to keep an eye on your property to see if anything may have been moved or displaced. Is this a place where a child could have hidden? If you have property that has ledges or holes that a teenager might find interesting and you can't search it for yourself, please contact the tip line and we can have someone check it out for you. If you know Sebastian and have information about him, what he likes, how he acts, that you think could be relevant, let us know. So as you can see, while the search was certainly extensive and the involved parties should be commended for their efforts, nothing new was turning up. The fact remained they had no leads and therefore no way to proceed. Seth, however, did not give up the hunt and was checking on every tip he received, telling WKRN, "I've been all around Nashville, I've been passing out flyers, it's time to start branching out farther, I just want to find my son." That same March 22nd articles reported that Seth, acting on a tip, had organized a search of Natchez and Trace National Park, which took the search over 100 miles from where it had started. And based on videos posted to X, it seems that this search was pretty loose and unorganized, them just walking around the park calling out for Sebastian. And as for the tip itself, whatever the source was, it was not present in the article. And the fact that Seth was willing to look so far away prompted other questions about his thoughts. Asked if he thought that Sebastian had left voluntarily, he said, "I don't know what to believe. All I know is he disappeared out of his mother's house, and it's my job to find him and bring him home." This was a task in which he was not alone, as WSMV reported on the 23rd that the United Cajun Navy had joined the effort after ceasing their search for Riley Strain in Nashville. I do have a couple of updates on that case, as I said, but those are going to wait until the end. News Nation reported that David Flagg, the incident commander for the United Cajun Navy, said it was Seth Rogers who had requested their assistance. And speaking to the media, he said, "First and foremost, we'd like to see Sebastian found safe and sound. I think that's everybody's hope, and that's always our hope. We're just people helping people. We have a lot of different skill sets in a lot of different areas, and I think our biggest thing is our dedication." And as all of this was going on, the Proudfoots began making public appearances and public statements to the media. And to be quite frank, as I said at the beginning of this video, I did not have the time to go through all of it yet. There are inconsistent stories about the night of the disappearance, there's odd body language during interviews, there's old court documents, there are even accusations of abuse or negligence flying in both directions. I've only really scratched the surface of the strangeness of it all, and while going over what I have learned so far would certainly be an interesting segment for the video, I don't think it's the right thing to do. This is an active, ongoing case involving a missing child, and I want to be absolutely positive that I have my facts straight before I present you with any more information. I will tell you, you will not need to wait long for part 2. I am writing the follow-up to this episode this week. Sebastian could still be out there, he could still be alive, and our best chance at this point of bringing him home safe is awareness, is spreading the word. So that means this is going to be a 2-part video, and that means that if I feel like I haven't been able to tell the whole story in 2 parts, there will be a part 3. My hope is that between our coverage of this case and with people like Brace and Cyrus pushing for more awareness, we will be able to get this back into the mainstream news, back into the public consciousness, and hopefully we can bring Sebastian home, or at the very least, bring some closure to his family. That right there is the most important part of all of this, is if Sebastian can come home, let's do everything we can to make that happen. And what I can say for certain is that if you thought that the stuff I told you about in this episode was weird, buckle up. Now, all of that said, it does feel a little weird to say on the bright side, but going back to Nashville meant that I could revisit the Riley Strain case briefly. And since we first covered that back in March, there have been several significant updates. Most importantly, since we put our video out, the toxicology and autopsy reports have come in, and I'm a little bit perplexed by the results. In the weeks after Riley Strain's body was recovered from the Columbia River outside of Nashville, there were a few loose ends. Toxicology was a key question of mine, particularly with concern towards central nervous system depressants, and specifically GHB due to its very short half-life. So I went and found the autopsy report. Now, GHB can be processed out of the body in 6 to 12 hours, which makes it extremely difficult to catch. In this case, the toxicology report says that there was no trace of GHB, Rohypnol, or other central nervous system depressants. The fact that there was no sign of GHB in his system means that either he was not drugged with GHB, or that he was alive for at least 6 hours after consumption. Either way, even without the possibility of a date rape drug's involvement, Riley was far more intoxicated than initial reports led people to believe. He had a BAC of 0.228 and was well above the reporting threshold for both delta-9 THC and 11-hydroxy delta-9 THC. The latter of these is a result of processing by the liver, which means that Riley had both smoked and consumed THC that night. And when I say that these were well above the reporting threshold, I mean like way above the reporting threshold. Like 100 times over the reporting threshold. And then, of course, there's the alcohol side of things. Now, when you drink liquor or beer or whatever and it gets processed, it shows up in your blood as ethyl alcohol or ethyl alcohol. I don't know how the word is pronounced. Do I look like a chemist? The term you would know here is ethanol. So it was the ethanol that was getting that 0.228 reading. That was the alcohol, the liquor and beer and wine, things like that he had consumed that night brought him to that point. And the reason I'm harping on this right now is that usually you only see ethanol. What you don't typically see in a tox screen for somebody who got drunk and drowned is isopropanol or isopropyl alcohol. I wasn't able to get to the bottom of the possible accidental sources of isopropyl alcohol in the blood aside from drinking it. The important part here is how high above the reporting threshold it is, because the reporting threshold is typically set for how much of something you would have endogenously, how much of something you might have accidentally, just as a result of basic exposure. Accidentally drinking a little bit of isopropyl alcohol would not put you at 2.5 times the reporting threshold. So I'm fully open to there being other possibilities, and remember, I obviously, as we're doing right now, I do give updates on things from time to time, so if you know of another way somebody might have 2.5 times the reporting threshold of isopropanol in their system, please tell me, because right now, the only thing I can think is that he drank isopropyl alcohol, which is not something you do when you have access to regular alcohol, and he did. It's also not something you do to your friend as a prank. You don't go, hey, here, take this shot of vodka and then hand them rubbing alcohol. That will kill them. Now, I will admit, stupid people might do that. That's possible. But if they did and he died as a result, that would be involuntary manslaughter. In fact, it might actually be voluntary manslaughter, depending on the circumstances. Point is, that stuck out to me. Why was there isopropanol in Riley's system? That should not have been there. And I guess the most important part here is that you're looking at his situation. It is unsurprising that he was removed from the bar. From, I think it was Luke's 32, right? 32 Bridge, Luke's 32 Bridge or something like that. Yeah, it's unsurprising to me that he was removed from the bar. What's utterly shocking to me is that none of his friends thought to go with him. I mean, 0.228, that's a lot of alcohol in your system on its own. To then have that much THC in your system, on top of somebody apparently giving him isopropyl, there is a video that has come out. I'll have Aiden put it into this segment. There's a video that's come out that shows him going down the stairs. That dude should not have been left alone. It should have been very obvious to all of his friends that he was not there. And they left him there in the bar. And what's driving me a little bit insane is I feel like I remember a story about his friends saying that the bouncers took Riley out the back door. I also feel like I remember one story saying that one of his friends at least walked down the stairs to the door with him. I can't find the articles for either of those. I'm going to go back and look for them again. But I very vividly remember there being an article about one of his friends accompanying him at least to the door. I can't find it, but the video shows that's not the case if I'm remembering that correctly. I might be remembering it incorrectly. Again, I will try and figure it out for sure. So that also bugged me because looking at that video, there is absolutely no reason that his friends should have allowed him to leave alone. And then they also went and said that it was the bar that wouldn't let them leave. And the bar was like, we absolutely did not tell them they couldn't leave. And having worked in a bar, their excuse, well, we had a tab, they wouldn't let us leave. Bullshit. Sorry, no. I've worked at bars, Aiden's worked at bars. I've been to Nashville, I've been to bars in Nashville. I've watched people get kicked out of bars in Nashville. That's not a rule. That was something his friends made up. I remember when we made our Riley Strain video, I had said something along the lines of like, his friends probably already feel bad enough about this. I have changed my mind. This, beyond any shadow of a doubt, confirms that Riley was far too intoxicated to be anywhere on his own and should not have been allowed to leave without help. I will say the bar should have made his friends leave with him too, because they do have the power to do that. But all of that considered, it's not the only factor with Riley Strain, and it's not the only thing that's still a little weird. When I looked at the autopsy, it told me a few things. For example, that Riley was pulled from the water wearing a black and tan, he was wearing a black and white shirt when he went missing, and the mud had stained it tan, blue underwear, black socks, and a blue watch on his left wrist. It also noted 2 necklaces, 1 silver and 1 gold in color, and that all of his clothing was covered in a dense layer of mud. Most interesting, however, was the report of his physical condition, which raised my eyebrows a bit. First off, there was reportedly no sign of significant trauma to Riley's body. There were no broken bones, no spinal cord injuries, and even his fingers and toes remained unharmed. And the reason this strikes me as odd is that where Riley is supposed to have gone into the water, according to the police, there's no easy way to walk down. He would have either had to go a lot farther down the sidewalk and then turn around and come back, or he would have had to climb down what is a very steep embankment. In Riley's heavily intoxicated state, I really don't see a way that he successfully scales down what is nearly a cliff face without falling. And at those heights, if you were to fall, especially with all of the trees there, you would face serious injury. Basically, had Riley attempted to climb down that embankment, he almost certainly would have fallen, and at those heights, with all of the rocks and trees all over the place, he would have sustained significant injuries. The other oddity was a line reading, "Rigor mortis is partially developed in the joints," which should be impossible if Riley died the night he disappeared. The reason I say that is that rigor mortis typically is in and out in 72 hours. It can be a longer or shorter process depending on things like temperature, humidity, insect life, all of that. But in general, average of 72 hours. I did track down one study which found that rigor can last up to 16 days when the corpse is refrigerated, but they were using a temperature of 4 degrees Celsius. According to the USGS, however, the temperature of the Cumberland River never fell below 10.8 degrees while Riley was in it. In addition to that, even in this study by Lorenzo Loreto and Umberto Corto, 16 days was an outlier, with most test subjects exiting rigor within 10 days. So I'm very perplexed by how Riley could, after 14 days in water that warm, still be in rigor, even just partial rigor. Like, to me, that suggests he did not go in the river the night that he went missing. As for the cause of death, the medical examiner ruled it to be accidental drowning and ethanol intoxication. Usually I see with ethanol intoxication in these reports, but this could just be the way it was written. The reasoning for this was partially where the body was found, but also the presence of mild pulmonary edema, which can be a result of drowning. On the other hand, pulmonary edema can also be a result of isopropyl alcohol poisoning. And Riley definitely consumed some isopropyl alcohol that night. So given the current evidence available in Riley Strain's situation, I want to be clear, I do think it's possible this was an accident. I'm just very skeptical of the official narrative for a number of reasons. One big one is a segment of surveillance video footage that the police refuse to release to the public, and which police documents obtained by WZTV claim shows a person that appears to be Strain standing beyond the concrete barriers at the wooden rail that is under the James Robertson Parkway Bridge. Now that, of course, would support the hypothesis that he entered the water in that general vicinity, except for the bit where they also say he fell off a ledge directly into the water. The problem with that line of thinking there, that Riley just fell over the ledge directly into the water, is that according to USGS data, the water level was not high enough for that to happen. Had Riley simply fallen off the bridge straight down, he would have hit the ground first, not the water. And if he hit the ground first, he'd have injuries consistent with a fall, and he didn't. And then I have further questions regarding this footage, considering that the police refuse to release it, and they say it's the last time Riley appeared on cameras. As we just went over, Riley essentially cannot have fallen into the water where they're claiming he did. And yet, if he had walked any further up the road, he would have found himself behind the city jail, where multiple signs are very clear that the area is under 24-hour video surveillance. So either Riley somehow made an impossible fall into the water, sustaining 0 injuries, or Riley was captured on those cameras and the police are lying, or those cameras aren't actually operational and the police are lying. If we look at their explanation for not releasing the footage, multiple outlets reported that the police said the video was of low quality and didn't show anything of value. Problem I have with that is the police did release 3 or 4 other videos of Riley from that night that showed low quality and nothing of value. So what is it about this low quality video that shows nothing of value? I also find it a little bit interesting that they claim to have a video of Riley standing in the precise location they say he fell from, but no video of Riley falling. Now, there could be a legitimate reason why they're not showing this video. The problem is, they're not telling anybody what it is. If they don't want people to be skeptical, and if they want people to trust them, they need to tell us what's going on. Does that video show a potential suspect? Well, you're saying it was accidental, so no, in which case, are you not showing us the video because Riley's family has requested privacy? If that is the case, tell us, because we will believe Riley's family, but we're not gonna believe the police. Nashville is a tourist town. It is the kind of place where politics might trump openness. You might have the mayor looking at it going, I mean, this would be bad for tourism if people knew that someone was throwing tourists in the river. Can we make it look like an accident? I mean, let's be real. We all know how we would like for police departments to work, but they don't. They don't work like that. There are good cops. There's also bad ones. And unfortunately, all of them are under the thumb of politicians who are very rarely good people. I mean, left, right, red, blue, it doesn't really matter. The people getting into office usually aren't doing it, the straightforward way. So for those reasons, especially when you look at the tourism issue and the possibility of politics meddling in investigation here, until these questions are firmly answered, how can you be in rigor mortis after 14 days? Why aren't you showing us that surveillance video? Things like that. I'm going to remain skeptical of this case. And when I look at Sebastian Rogers, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm skeptical about too, but in different ways and for different reasons. And because of how delicate this situation is, how many real living people's lives could be impacted by reporting on it, I want to make sure that I'm doing it the right way, and that's why I refrained from going into anything that really happened after March 23rd in this video. Because there were things that happened, there are things I didn't cover in this video. For example, there's the video that Nick Barris reported on the 14th, where it shows what appears to be 2 flashlights in the backyard across a common area from a house adjacent to Riley's. But not long after that, it was confirmed that they don't think that's related to this case. I'd like to know why they don't think it was related. But while most of the intrigue with Strain was regarding, are the police being honest, most of my concerns with Sebastian Rogers are not about the police. It's about other people involved in his life and the things they're saying about each other and the things they're saying about him that really complicate all of it. So when I come back to this next week, what I'm hoping to be able to give you is a full accounting of what everyone involved in this story has said, and any contradictions in their own accounts, any contradictions in each other's accounts, anything where maybe there's a conflict, maybe their statements are adversarial. I just want to go through all the information and present it to you guys so that, I'm going to draw my own conclusion, of course, but so that we can all kind of look at it and maybe have more than one brain on it. I feel like to a certain extent we're crowdsourcing investigative work, which is kind of cool, I think. But anyway, my point is to say that the next video on this subject is going to be very complicated, very convoluted, and in my opinion, very interesting to say the least. With all of that said, if you would like to support what we do here at the Lore Lodge, you can do so by subscribing to our Patreon or right here on YouTube for just $1 a month. That will get you access to the scripts from these episodes, to the transcripts of these episodes, and a whole bunch of other exclusive stuff. We aren't super consistent with the other things, but, there's fun stuff that comes out, like Liquored Lore, which I think I have to put the July one out soon. I don't think I've scheduled it yet. I might have. I don't know if I posted it. Either way, it's Aiden and I have a few drinks and we talk about folklore, history, just nonsense from the past. It's a lot of fun. You can also check out our other channels. You can go to the Weird Bible, the Weird Bible, the History Hut, my channel, Aiden Mattis. We also now have partner channels that are Last Call Lounge with Celso. He is a phenomenal bartender that we know, and he talks about the bar industry, the service lifestyle, some of the crazy stories that these guys run into. I've been on an episode, Aiden's been on an episode. Got a couple of other people as well. We also have Off the Record with Luke Eccles, which is a music show where he talks to people in the music industry, from the service staff at bars that play live bands all the way up to the live bands themselves. It's going to be just a phenomenal show. I am so excited for what we've already shot and what we're going to be shooting in the future. And all of that is on what is the Redacted Media Network. That is our group, our lineup, and we will be taking more people for it eventually. The only deal is that you have to be able to get to the studio. We also have our own live show, which is The Lore Lads. That is live Sunday nights at 7 p.m. unless it's not. And if it's not, we'll tell you where and why. If you can't catch the podcast live here on YouTube, you also can catch it as a video on demand here, or you can get it on Spotify, Apple, everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also support us by buying our coffee from Tableau Roasting Company. It is delicious. I drink it every day, and I designed the blend myself. I was a barista at an artisan roastery for a long number of years, about a third of my life. Another way that you can support us is by getting our merch from Bunker Branding. We have given the official good to go on all of our designs, and that should be going up as a listing very soon. As soon as it is, you will see it right in our descriptions. It will be on the main page. Be able to get it anywhere and everywhere. And then, of course, the best place to get updates, to interact with the community, all of that is our Discord. I actually do hang out in there. It's usually for gaming, but I do hang out in the Discord. You will have a chance to talk to us. Good place to be. Also, all of the updates go there first. You get updates on Discord first before anything else. I think that covers just about everything on our end. What I do want to say is if you have anything you know about this case, definitely let us know, but also make sure to submit a tip to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, because they are the ones, from my understanding, handling this case at the moment. So tell me for sure, but definitely also tell them. I also really do want to give a sincere, heartfelt thank you to Brazen Cyrus, because not only did I pronounce his name wrong for most of this video, only to get a DM telling me how to properly pronounce it, but I probably would not be revisiting this without him. I think it's a very important case. And, you know, when you have that big of a platform, when you have the weight to throw around like that, I am just very impressed, and my heart is warmed that somebody is doing it in that way, that somebody is using their platform to shine a light on something like this. That is admirable, and I am grateful for what he did in this case. Okay, so without further ado, I will be bringing you much more information on this next week, when I have plenty of time to research it and to really dig in. And thanks for stopping by the Lore Lodge.